This is March the 6th, 2006. We're speaking with Danny Donohue, Donohue, president of CSEA, and we're going to talk a little bit this morning about the Public Employee Safety and Health Act. Danny, to begin with, what do you remember? You were Long Island Region president at the time that the Public Employee Safety and Health Act was lobbied for and ultimately enacted under Governor Hugh Carey. What do you remember about that campaign?
I remember a huge struggle we had with a number of other people in the labor movement about the idea that the PESH Act wouldn't be enough, that it wasn't everything everyone wanted. What they forgot was that at that point in time, public employees had no safety and health regulation. As a matter of fact, even today, there are a number of states where public employees are not treated or not protected by any safety and health programs. So we knew then that it would be a difficult haul for our own people. In our own house at the time, too, we had a convention where our delegates voted to support the concept of a safety and health department for CSEA and to push safety and health as the prime issue affecting every member we represent.
And what do you remember specifically about the campaign? What did CSEA as an organization do? What did you do to involve rank and file members?
Well, what we did was use the rank and file members to get this story out, to talk to those politicians out there who weren't sure that this concept of a safety and health bill for public employees really was the issue. What we did was tell them about situations where employees were hurt, where employees were injured, where employees were threatened. Clearly, if the employees that work to service the public are not safe, then the public can't be safe in the buildings and the areas it's in. So we made the message very clear, not by having the leaders per se, but by having the people who've actually experienced the problems out there talk to the politicians and make them understand it is a real and, in some cases, devastating situation.
What kind of response did you get from lawmakers on this issue initially?
Initially, a lot of them poo-pooed it by saying it really wasn't a big issue. Well, employees get hurt every day on the job. Things sometimes are dangerous. What they are thinking about is an employee tripping in a parking lot or slipping on the ice. They're not talking about people getting violent on the jobs, people threatening people, people injuring other people. These seem to have gotten lost in the per se of safety and health. What does it really mean? When you're talking safety and health with a public employee, you're talking about someone who deals with the public every day. There's no guarantee whether or not the individual coming in is happy, sad, it's been a good day or a bad day. And for our own employees, there's no guarantee either. A simple word, a simple gesture could get you in all kinds of trouble or have a problem on your hands that could affect a lot of other people.
If you can think back to even when you were a local president, what was the course of action if somebody encountered an on-the-job problem with a safety and health issue, such as a violent patient that they might be dealing with, or toxic chemicals that they might not know they're working with? What was the course of action?
Normally, the course of action from the management perspective was just to say, well, go do it and we'll complain about it later. The union's perspective, and it isn't always agreed with by everybody in the union at times, is when you're not sure, don't do it. Don't risk your life or safety or the lives of safety of the people you're working with when you don't know the situation. If you see chemical spills somewhere, you don't go over and clean it up because you don't know what you're doing to begin with. You're not trained for that. And if you mix certain chemicals together with water, you can make things worse than they were before. When it comes with a violent patient, back in those days, the argument was get 5 other staff and sit on the patient. Problem with that concept is you had 5 other staff, the patient probably wouldn't have gone off to begin with. There never is enough people in those kind of personal situations. When violence of a mental patient, or for that matter, someone from the public gets going, all you can do is ask for assistance, and in some cases, there was never enough concern to even have assistance. People can go too far by having encased public employees in bulletproof glass and say, please don't come out of it. Well, that doesn't help if someone on the motor vehicle line is acting up and that individual starts hurting other civilians out there. Public employees have a responsibility just not to protect themselves, but also to protect the rest of the public. And that's what made a safety and health bill necessary and vital for our people. Besides the fact that when our people are out there, you have our members who do road patrol, who pick up carcasses of deer and animals that are killed every day. We had one individual who actually wound up with a severe case of Lyme disease and passed away because of it. But what the problem was that not only was he in danger, but his family was. The carcasses he was throwing in the back of the truck the fleas or whatever the carriers were on him. He'd take them home to his children and his wife. When we talk safety and health, we're talking a broadest band as possible. We want to make sure that no employee has to worry about going to work in the morning or going home at night to bring it home to their family. That's why we believe the safety and health has an impact across the board on every member we represent.
So once the PESH Act was enacted into law, how did things begin to change for public employees? What were some of the provisions that provided for protection?
Well, as I just said, on the road patrols, they were given aprons and long gloves, protective gear, hard hats, and steel-toed shoes in certain industrial situations. The basics that were expected to be there and that most of the public thought we were already covered with suddenly started showing up. People started looking at safety and health in a different perspective. It wasn't just a question of what's safe and what isn't, and not even the heavy stuff. In an office situation, the ergonomic issue rose up rather quickly. The advent of computers to the point where you needed certain lighting, you needed certain screens, screen protectors for eyes, glasses if you're on computers, carpal tunnel syndrome materials to keep your wrists at the right angles. All of those issues suddenly came forward, and they were in areas that people never thought about before. When we talk safety and health, yeah, a truck driver would think about it. A clerk wouldn't. But a clerk was in just the same danger. If outlets were jammed, if they weren't venting for copying machines, if carpal tunnel syndrome equipment wasn't available, if lighting wasn't available to let you look at a screen for 8 hours a day, your eyes had problems. You even needed special glasses that you couldn't wear anywhere else except on your computer screen, basically. And we were able to put those in our contracts. We were able to start addressing the needs of people that didn't even know they had the need until we were able to show it to them.
There's something in the PESH Act called the General Duty Clause, which basically says it is the obligation of the employer, of the public employer, to provide a safe work site. Does that help the union in making its case, and how does management respond when those kinds of issues are raised?
In most cases, let me do it from the back end. Most cases, when it's raised to management, management will at least take a look at it. The problem then becomes management in some cases retreats under their rights and their protections. Well, what you're asking us to do may cost money. Well, no, in most cases what we're asking you to do may save you money in the long run. We're asking you to sit down with the employees and look at what is a safe environment. Do you have panic buttons in certain rooms? Do you have a desk with things on it that people can throw if there's a problem? Do you update the standards for your salt spreading machines, or do you make sure that the trucks are meeting road standards, just not to be able to go out and do their jobs, but in every safety situation? We've had, sadly to say it, we've had people die because of cogs in salt spreading machines that have been left uncovered that should have been covered. The argument was, well, when it came through, it didn't have a cover on it. That's still no excuse for that individual who died when his clothing was caught and he was choked. The situation too where we have people cleaning areas where they need support, where suddenly you knock down a dam in some areas and the employee drowns because the water rushes in so greatly and they're alone and they're not working with another assistant. Situations on highways where single man plowing is dangerous because you can't work someone 8 to 12, 14 hours on a single plow situation and not expect them to lose their ability to concentrate, lose their ability to be able to do their job effectively after 8 or 10 hours. I don't care who you are. So all of those issues are there, but when management hears them, their tendency at first is to look at it. The next tendency is to look at the cost. In some cases, they don't look at the real cost, and the real cost in some cases is lives.
CSEA advocates safety and health committees in their locals. Why do we take that approach, and does safety and health have to be an adversarial issue?
It shouldn't be an adversarial issue. It should be the one issue that binds us with the management. Because as I said before, if our employees can't be safe, then the managers can't be safe and the general public can't be safe. What it should be is the kind of area where we can all come around the issues. How do we make the building safe for everyone in it? How do we make the job safe for everyone there? Recently, Motor Vehicle put up great big bulletproof screens in different areas, over a number of years ago, I should say. And when they put up those screens, we complained because it separated us from everyone. The problem then became an attempt 5 or 10 years later to get us back to the public, they took them all down. But they didn't increase the workers that were there. So when people stood on lines for hours and weren't able to take care of situations, we had people acting out, people on lines with guns, people on lines that were acting to the point where we had to call the police in some cases. And that only works when the police are close enough to be helpful. Because our people can be protected in some cases, but the general public can't be. So our job is not just to say, well, we're safe. It's to say if someone in the line is acting irrationally, then we have a responsibility to protect those other people.
What's the importance of training in terms of people's on-the-job safety?
Well, as you pointed out, with safety and health, having safety and health committees on at every level of CSEA, actually, from the unit to the local, we want safety and health issues to be addressed by the people in the field that are there doing it. No one can better understand the danger than the people involved in it. So part of the idea is just not to identify problems, but how to train our people on how to handle them. What do they do in certain situations? What do they do in situations? It's similar to CPR. When someone collapses, what do you do? You could have all the best intentions in the world. If you don't know what you're doing, you could hurt someone. We're saying that people in safety and health situations have to be trained to look at what is a safety and health problem. If a wire is across the floor, if a pile of material is blocking a doorway. For that matter, if a copying machine needs to be vented, although most of the new machines don't, but it is still a question of chemicals and materials that are used, including some of our cleaning crews who are told to clean a floor with compounds that don't have the right labeling on it or don't explain what to do in case of emergencies. We've had sick building syndrome because of cleaning compounds used to clean floors or to clean radiators. And then somebody says, well, what went wrong? Well, no one read the instructions on how to use the materials and instructed the employees how to use it. So it's vital that if we don't do the training in some cases, no one will. And we may act overly involved in the training. That's because we want to make sure that there are no problems out there. We don't want to find out later that 5 or 10 or one person collapsed because somebody just didn't read the chemical listings.
What is the responsibility of the individual worker to their own safety and health?
The individual worker has the key responsibility of being able to keep track of what goes on. You don't do the obvious thing. You don't put matches out in garbage cans. You don't break chemical seals without knowing what to do or whether you should be using the chemicals. You don't put yourself at risk, or in some cases risking other people. I love when we say to people, well, here's a hard hat, you have to wear it. Well, it's hot, it's uncomfortable, but if a number 10 can falls off a stacking crate 5 or 10 feet high, it could kill you. If someone's in a freezer and they don't wear the right safety gear and they get frostbite, we again don't want to be there so that when they amputate your fingers or your toes that things are good. That sounds extreme, but those are the kind of problems we run into. That same driver of the roadkill situation. Yes, he gets all the equipment. He gets the big apron. He gets the big gloves. It's warm. It's summertime. I don't need to pull all this stuff on. If you don't, what are you risking? And not just for yourself. We try to point out to our members that you're risking for your own family. You can bring home some of these problems to your own family that are not looking for it. When you walk into the house or when you suddenly touch something or do something, leave your clothes for the laundry, what can happen to those people if you haven't done the right thing for yourself? So the prime importance is to make sure you're aware of what you should be looking at. What does safety really mean to you? And not to be insane about it, but to be practical. Clearly, you don't walk out a window when you can go out a door. So use common sense and do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the? I mean, in any given year, do CSEA members die on the job?
Painfully, yes. We have a wall actually in our conference room where we put up plaques on Workers' Memorial Day for those workers who died in the line of duty. And they range. They range from chemical spills. They range from car flagmen on DOT roads being hit by cars who didn't slow down when they should have. Workers who dealing with chemicals. And every year we put those plaques up. We had one year that was probably one of the worst of all. We had 5 women killed in Watkins Glen, about 12 years ago, 14 years ago, where all those women did was go to work that day in the social services department. A deadbeat dad walked in with a gun, didn't like the idea that they were garnishing his pay for his children that he left, and he shot them. The real horrendous part about that was the fact that if one of those women would have been a civilian, one of the general public who was walking around that building, maybe today we'd have a standard in our office buildings, our court buildings, all of those other buildings that would protect everyone. We have been trying in their name for the last 12 to 14 years to get the state to recognize it just can't passively do safety and health. It has to do it proactively. You can't let people come into buildings with knives, guns, hairpins, hatchets. Some of the courts that have installed metal detectors have found all of the things I just named, plus others, of people coming in with those things. These are people who are coming in at the most vulnerable part of their lives. They're coming in because of child cases, divorces, criminal cases. And the last thing you want is public employees being put in a situation where their lives are in danger, because what would have happened to the public? To those 5 ladies, we say, we're sorry. We're sorry we couldn't have done better than we did that day, but we're also sure we're never going to forget that safety and health is our main goal.
Now, very often you hear the argument that even if you put all of the safety protections in place, people are still going to get hurt, people are still going to be killed on the job. How do you respond to that?
Well, that I respond to in the sense that, then let's do it. Let's put all of those things in place and then look at what happens when people do get injured. I understand the term accident. I understand the term act of God. But I also understand the terms of negligence by people who could have done better. When we say to someone, we're going to make it as safe as we can, we should do just that. We should never play games with the cost or the situations where safety is put at risk for anyone. To suddenly say that we want the public to be safe and not the public employees is an oxymoron that can't be allowed. We have to be able to stand up and say we're having the safest workplaces available. Why? Because we deal with the public. If, as I keep coming back to, if we can't be safe, but public employees can't be safe, then the public can't be safe out there.
Okay. So how would you assess the impact of the PESH Act over 25 years?
I think the PESH Act has gone a long way to save lives, to protect our people, to get our people thinking about the safety and health situation that they face every day, to thinking about how do they protect themselves and the general public. Whenever one of our members go to work and actually looks at a doorway and says, is it really a safe doorway? Can we really get out of it? When someone looks at the copying machine and says, well, okay, fine, there's no chemicals here, so we shouldn't have a problem. They're doing what we've asked them to do. They're knowledgeable, they've learned, or they've been trained, in some cases, to look for the obvious, and they're making sure that the public is as safe as they are. They're making sure that the buildings are safe, that there isn't going to be a fire, that people in those buildings are going to have breathable air, that people that come in and visit are going to be as safe as they can possibly be. I think PESH went a long way to protect a lot of lives, to make sure a lot of people are alive today or not injured today that would have been if that bill hadn't been passed 25 years ago.
And when people do encounter on-the-job danger, do they have a fair line of recourse?
Oh, absolutely. Because of those safety and health committees, we can get our people immediately to the management. We have our own safety and health department here in CSEA where we have hygienists, we have people we can send out to check chemicals. We have our own people to verify what the state is saying in some cases and argue. There aren't enough federal PESH representatives in the federal government to come and service everyone or look at every complaint. We file our own individual complaints. We follow up with testing on it. We are the ones saying to our members, we do not want you in an unsafe situation, and we'll take that fight to any court in the world.
Okay. I think that gives us pretty much what we need. Let me just ask you a few personal questions regarding your personal experiences with safety and health. Do you remember, when you were working in a psychiatric center, some of the dangerous circumstances you encountered?
Well, the chief disaster in the psychiatric center was the fact there was never enough staff. There was always overcrowding, especially when I was first started. There was something in the neighborhood of 100,000, over 150,000 mental patients in the state of New York at about 52 facilities. Staffing levels were always a crime because you didn't have enough staff to take care of those patients. And when one acted out, in some cases it was a chain reaction. Back in the old days, you handed out Thorazine as if it was aspirin, anything to keep the patients calm, sedated, to the point where they couldn't do anything wrong. But that never always stopped. You have mental patients that are crammed into areas. Nowadays, the argument is that, well, we have psychotropic drugs that are going to make things better. Well, they're not all that better. Now what you've done is you've taken out those patients who can survive in the community but need support. And you've left in some of those facilities the worst case of the bunch, those that can't get outside and do it. So these are the ones that need more intensive support, more intensive one-on-one type of operations, and yet we've reduced the workforce. We keep cutting the workforce in mental health because in the mental retardation side, we get funding from the federal government. So the state likes to get some help with that. On mental health side, they don't get funding after a certain age. So what happens then is these people are left on their own, or they're left in the old institutional settings, where if they got the proper treatment and they got the proper support, maybe they can do a little better. They may never be able to get into the community. In the old days, as I said before, they would tell you on these training films, just hold John and get 5 other people and basically sit on them, physically sit on them so they would not hurt themselves or anyone else. If you had 5 staff, you were a rarity to begin with. And if while you're sitting on John, you have 100 other Johns trying to get through the walls and sometimes through your head. The injury rates in mental health are the highest in the state for any department. And that's because of the question of dealing with the public, not the public so much, dealing with patients who act out, dealing with patients who are in mental hospitals, not because they have no better place to go, because they do have problems. And those problems aren't always dealt with by cutting staff and over-medicating in some cases.
You mentioned,
And we are rolling in.
I know that you mentioned before the Watkins Glen murders, and there were actually 4 CSEA members who were murdered there, but we did lose 5 members in the World Trade Center. Now, in both of those circumstances, I know that you met with the families afterward. What kind of experience is that like when you have to talk to a family of people who were killed in pretty horrific circumstances?
When you have to deal with someone who's been killed in a situation where no normal person would ever think would ever happen. Nobody goes to work in the morning thinking you're going to die on the job, whether it's from a deadbeat dad or a terrorist in a plane at 110 stories. And you have to deal with those families, and you want to say you care. You want them to understand if there was a way in the world to ever change what's happening in their lives, you would do it for them. And yet you know that to a certain degree you're a new face. You may not have met these people personally. You don't know what their lives are really all about. And we have a tendency to make them saints. We have a tendency to believe all the best in all of them. And yet we also know they had lives. They were human. They were real. When someone says how someone went to work that day to save the world, that's nice. But in truth, they went to work that day to pay the bills for their mortgage, the kids to go to college, to get their retirement. We had one individual, Curtsy, I believe. I'm probably mispronouncing the name. One of our people that died in the World Trade Center. And his wife made it so easy for me because when we met and we talked for a while, she says, my husband lied to me. We were married 27 years and he lied to me. He told me twice that day he was safe. At the funeral, women came up to her and told her that he had actually led 2 groups of people out of the building and went in for a 3rd group to try to get them out. He was a hero that day, but he was a father, and his wife remembers him in the sense that, she didn't know how wonderful a man he was, and when all these women were saying, she was saying to me, who was this man she had married 27 years ago? He was such a nice man. She didn't know that, but she made him human. She gave him a face. We're all vulnerable people, and that day a lot of people were heroes. A lot of people who didn't have uniforms on, a lot of people who truly went to work that day just to do the right thing and stood up for those people around them to the point where it cost their lives. Those people who work in public service, I believe, deserve the credit of putting their lives on the line. Not maybe every day as a police officer, a fire officer, a correction officer, but every day out there in the general public, servicing them, making sure their lives are better. In some cases, doing that, neglecting their own. When you talk to a snowplow driver after he's been working 8 hours and you ask him, did he get to plow his own driveway today? You're liable to find out he didn't, but he did a lot of other people's. That's why when we say to people that, public employees should be respected for what they do, not necessarily when people stand there and say, well, there's one guy leaning on a hose or a brush. The truth of the matter is most of our people are out there working every day hard to make the public's life safe, productive, and so that they don't even think about us at times. The only time they really think about us is when we're not there. In the World Trade situation and with those people in Watkins Glen, we say to those families we care and we mean it. The problem is that we want to make sure that that can never happen again. And we know there's no sure way of doing that, but we got to try.
CSEA looks at the PESH Act as one of the most significant accomplishments of the union in its history. Do you remember the reaction when it was passed?
When the PESH Act was passed, we had a number of reactions, not the least of which was euphoria that we had gotten something finally. But we also had the confusion amongst ourselves. Now, what did we create? What rules and regulations did it really mean? I'll give you the classic example of what went on at our convention. President McGowan, when the committee was formed, was turning around saying, what does this mean? Our own Constitution violated, because what it said was in CSEA you cannot have a committee unless it's a committee of the whole. That's a wrong thing. I jumped to the wrong story. Okay, no. With the safety and health issue, it wasn't McGowan's thought. It was the rank and file members. The rank and file members at a convention made a motion to McGowan and the officers of the union to have a safety and health department. McGowan didn't have plans on having a safety and health department. It became a groundswell at the convention itself to the point where McGowan couldn't stop it. But by the same token, we didn't know what it meant. We had created a department without knowing, without having the research, without knowing everything from staff to regulations we had to deal with. So it was one of those issues where now we have it. Now what are we going to do with it? I'm proud to say that I think over the last 25 years under Bill McGowan and Joe McDermott, and I think with the help of Danny Donohue, we've made it better. We've made it stronger. We've tried to improve it every year. No one can say that safety and health isn't our prime directive. The real issue here is to get everybody to understand it should be theirs as well.
I think that's
Do
perfect.
you want me to do Watkins Glen as 4 people instead of 5?
No, we'll I mean, we can edit it in a way, and when we do the transcript, we'll note that it was incorrect, that
Sorry.
it was done. That's fine. Oh, it's fine.
All of a sudden, when Saunders got up and said the 3 people from DC 37,
Yeah.
they had a zest for life and they died and they this, that, he didn't know them.
Yeah.
I didn't know these people. But yet, she made it so easy because
Because you were able to talk to them and get a
and
feel for them.
feel for them, because here we still have, a number of years later, we still have one of those people we couldn't give the money to because they're still fighting over dependents. But in her case, it wasn't the money, it was someone she loved. Marty was a guy with all the warts and wrinkles who that day did more to save lives. Mm-hmm. Those women he helped out that building twice were saying to his wife, thank you for their lives. Because if he hadn't done it, they may have never left.
Yeah.
And that meant so much. It made it easier for me.
Absolutely.
As McEntee said, we made it an Irish wake.
Absolutely.
The idea is nobody cries, you just remember the good.